Okay, we are going to go ahead and read chapter 8, Glass of Water. Please make sure you have the text out in front of you. You can have it in a separate window, but you want to be following along as we go through this text. And make sure that you also have a piece of paper that you can be writing these annotations down. When you turn in your annotations, we need to see that you've written these down as well as your own annotations so that you can receive credit. We're going to go over the first part of this chapter together, and then you're going to complete it independently. Now, remember, we're focusing on RL 5.5, which is how do parts of the story contribute to the overall structure. So we're going to look at different paragraphs. How do they fit into our text? What about the chapter as a whole? What kind of information are we given as from this chapter, and how does it help us put the pieces together? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to begin reading. I'm going to start reading aloud with chapter 8, and we'll pause to make annotations as we go. If I were at home with Big Ma and Big Pa, we would have been bathed and in bed an hour and 5 minutes ago. But we weren't in Brooklyn. We were in Oakland with Cecile. I glanced at my trusty Timex. I wasn't mad that Vanetta had gotten the Timex with the pink wristband and couldn't hold on to it, while mine is plain and brown and still on my arm. My brown leather wristband is just fine. It's the clock part that matters anyway. I can count on it to keep things running on schedule. Its waterproof face told me what I needed to know, and at 9:35 in the evening, that it took 3 minutes for warm water and a handful of Tide soap powder to make the right amount of suds. 15 minutes was enough time for the day's dirt to fall to the bottom of the tub while Vanetta and Fern stayed bubble beehive hairdos on their heads and beards on each other. But give them 1 minute longer, and I'd end up pulling Fern off Vanetta and mopping up sops of water splashed onto the bathroom tiles. So we see again here that Delphine is very responsible, even more responsible, we could say, than her mother, Cecile. So remember, when we see these character traits repeated, we want to annotate for them, because whenever it's repeated over and over again, we realize that this is part of who they are. So this is a personality trait. So see, Delphine is responsible. And I'm going to put in parentheses, even more so, sorry about that, than Cecile. And I'm going to enlarge these annotations when we get to the end so you can copy them down if they're hard for you to see. So just sit tight. It's kind of a process to show you the text and the paper with the annotations. So we just want to annotate that she's responsible more so than her mother, who should, in her mind, should be doing these things, not her. So let's go ahead and continue. After I got my sisters in, out, dried and lotioned, I took my bath, setting my watch on the porcelain edge to keep an eye on my own 12 minutes in the tub. The watch part might have been waterproof, but the plain brown leather band didn't care for soap and hot water. Bath water made the leather hard and clammy against my skin. I always took it off. Only when I sat in the tub did I wish my Timex wasn't so reliable or the ticking so steady. Oh, how I wish the minute hand would slow down and give me a time for a nice long soak. Wish all I wanted. I couldn't leave Vanetta and Fern alone to sort out who'd sleep on what end of the daybed. 3 extra minutes in the tub and I'd be sorry. I stuck to the schedule. So we're going to pause here because we want to talk about how paragraphs contribute to the text. So why did the author include this piece, right? So when we're reading this story, right, it's always in forward motion. We always see the things in sequential order. We paused here and we're having some of these, we're getting a glimpse into some of Delphine's internal dialogue, right? So internal dialogue is, what is she thinking herself? So why did the author include this? Why did the author feel it was important for us to know how Delphine was feeling? And we're going to do C/M, so for character/motivation, because sometimes they kind of work together. The author put this because it wanted to give us some insight about the more vulnerable side of Delphine. So far we've seen this really tough, exterior on Delphine, who's always taking care of everyone, right? And we can think into our own lives. We know people who always carry the weight. We heard that in the last chapter. They talked about carrying the weight of the movement. We know people in our lives who carry the weight of very stressful situations, and they keep things moving and going for us to make sure that we're okay. Um, so this is kind of how Delphine is feeling. So the author includes this so that we could see that even though she's tough, she also longs, for some relaxation, maybe to be a child, maybe just to not have those responsibilities. So this shows us some insight. We want to go ahead and write that here for character motivation. This shows that Delphine longs for some relaxation and a break from responsibility, right? So it shows that she longs for some relaxation and a break from responsibility. And this is really important, right? That's why the author included this little interruption in our story. So let's continue reading forward. We were in our summer 90s. Vanetta and Fern lay side by side, their elbows propped up on the higher bed while I sat on the lower bed. Fern's eyelids grew droopy. Still, she yawned and demanded story time. I opened Peter Pan, one of the books I checked out for a 2-week loan before we left Brooklyn. I had it all worked out and counted the pages I'd read each night, dividing that by 28 days. I had $2.80 in my drawer at home to pay for the late fees for the remaining 2 weeks when we returned to Brooklyn. Okay, so the this also shows us that she is responsible. Again, we just continue to see how Delphine is responsible. I'm not going to annotate this because we've already had it twice. We have it 2 times in the first page. So we don't have to actually annotate this piece because I think we get the point that she's very responsible. But I just wanted to pause to let you know, like, this is another example that she just takes care of her business, right? That's not something we would expect from a young girl. Let's continue. This Peter Pan was better than the Peter Pan coloring books at home. It was a real book, thick with more than 100 pages of adventure. Vanetta and Fern were soon under the spell of Peter and Wendy flying high like fairies. Both Vanetta and Fern gave out 3 pages sooner than I had planned. I put my bookmark, a coaster from the airplane, in the right spot and pulled the blanket over my sisters. As quiet as a spy, I unbuckled my suitcase and took out my borrowed copy of Island of the Blue Dolphins. I turned off the gooseneck floor lamp and sat in the hallway where the light beamed from the living room. Cecile was in her kitchen doing whatever she did in there. So what does this... We talked about figurative language on Monday, and one of the things that we talked about was similes and metaphors. So quiet as a spy. I'm going to write that over here. Remember, we talked about when we were pulling something directly, we're going to put it in quotes, as quiet as a spy. Okay, so first we're going to say, what kind of figurative language is this? Is it personification? Is it giving human-like qualities to an object? No. Is it comparing 2 things? Yes. She is comparing herself with a spy. So now some of you might say, well, it says as quiet as a spy. It doesn't say Delphine was as quiet as a spy. So this is what we call an understood subject. So sometimes when we read something, we don't have that subject to start the sentence. We don't have that noun like I, Sarah, Jaden, John to start the sentence, right? But it's understood that's who we're talking about. So if you look here, it's followed by I here. So you see this comma. Now we're starting the sentence with who we're talking about. So we have to do a little bit of assuming of who this is. So as quiet as a spy, she's basically saying I was as quiet as a spy. Okay, it's understood. So as quiet as a spy, we're comparing something with like or as. That makes this a simile. And what is she trying to let the reader know? She's trying to say, so we're going to go ahead equals, because this is what it means. She was quiet and sneaky, right? So spies are sneaky. They don't want to be caught. So she was being quiet and sneaky. She wanted to make sure she didn't wake up her sister. So when we come across one of those three types of figurative language, it's always a good idea to stop and to analyze it so we make sure we know what it means. So let's continue. I fell asleep with my book in my lap. What woke me was a thump. Through clouded, sleepy eyes, I made out the back of Fern's ruffled nightie. Her little heels were headed to Cecile's kitchen. I shook myself awake and jumped to my feet. As sure as I knew Cecile was crazy and unmotherly, I knew I must stop Fern. Let's pause. We want to annotate this because her thoughts are letting us know a little bit about Cecile. Why does she want to stop Fern from going to the kitchen? We talked about the whole last chapter. Cecile did not want them in that kitchen. She didn't let them eat there. She told them to get lost. She didn't want them in her kitchen at all because she was hiding something. So, for motivation, Delphine wanted to stop Fern because Cecile was crazy. That's what she calls her. And she was afraid of what might happen to Fern if she went in there. And so she was worried about how Cecile would react to Fern going there to the kitchen. Okay, so she was worried about what the reaction from Cecile would be. Because remember, she hasn't been very opening, welcoming, motherly to the girls as of yet. So she's worried. She doesn't want Fern to get yelled at, right? So she's trying to stop her. It was too late. I wasn't fast enough to catch hold of Fern's nightie. Cecile was right there, guarding whatever she was hiding in the kitchen. Sleepy and sweet voiced, Fern asked, "Can I have a glass of water?" Papa could never bring himself to say no to Fern. He left that to Big Ma, Vanetta, and me. But Cecile said, "Drank the water in the bathroom." "It's nasty," said Fern. "Then you ain't thirsty, little girl." "I'm not little girl, I'm Fern." So one thing I want to go ahead and highlight here is that throughout this story, you're going to see that they continue to say, "I'm not this," and they call themselves by their name. So let's ask ourselves a question. What is the importance of a name? And I want you to hold on to that. I want you to think about that. Because remember, in the last chapter, we also learned Cecile is going by a different name now. So what is the importance of a name? And that's gonna come to fruition as we continue to read, and we're gonna develop on that idea. But I want to pause and I want us to ask that question. Okay, what is the importance of a name? Let's see. We're right here. We also want to say Cecile is not acting motherly, right? She's not acting motherly at all. And this is on page 4. She's not acting motherly at all. In fact, she's refusing to get water for Fern. Like, that's an easy task. Get a cup, fill it up, give her some water. Like, that's an easy thing. And she's saying, "No, go get it yourself out the bathroom." Okay, so let's continue. She didn't mean my mouth sped to Fern's rescue, but Cecile raised a hand and stopped me. I got the message, and she lowered her stop sign. "Let's get one thing straight, little girl. No one's going in my kitchen." So again, she's calling her little girl. It's hard to believe the last time they'd seen each other, Fern had been a loaf of bread in Cecile's arm. That was how Uncle Darnell told it to me. Some pieces of it I even remember. How Cecile had nursed Fern, burped her, and placed her in the crib before leaving us. It's funny that Cecile had at least thought to give Fern a last drink, but all the same time left Fern wanting her milk. Now, they stood across from each other, Cecile towering over Fern with her arms crossed, and Fern looking up at Cecile. Fern balled both fists, banging them against her side like she usually did before she jumped on Vanetta. So we want to pause, okay? And we talked about flashbacks in our mini lesson. So a flashback is a pause in action. So we stop that forward motion of the story and we look back through memory, through stories of the past told by characters, which is what's happening here, right? She's not dreaming. She's stopping the story to tell us something that happened in the past, a memory from the past. And so this is going to give us, this is filling us in. It's giving us some background on our characters, right? We don't know why Cecile left for sure. And up until this point, we didn't really know many of the details about the night she left. But now the narrator, Delphine, is filling us in. So we want to write flashback. So we're going to put over here FB. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. We're going to do FB, and this is on page, I haven't been doing the page numbers because it's a little hard for you to see both pages, but we want to make sure we put the page numbers as we annotate, okay? So flashback, Delphine gives us some background about the night Cecile left them for California. All right, so you want to make sure that you note that, you note where this is, and you really think about why she did this. What information were we given? This is going to be a question on your exit ticket, so it's really important. We've annotated it. We know this is a flashback, right? We're looking back in time. And then we need to think, why did the author include this? How does it contribute to the overall story? Well, it fills us in on some information about Cecile. And if we really want to look deep into this, we want to look at, she says, I even remember some pieces of it. And she tells us, let's highlight this part right here, right? So she says, Cecile nursed Fern, burped her, and placed her in the crib before leaving us. It's funny that Cecile had at least thought to give Fern a last drink, but all at the same time left her wanting milk. So at some point, right, Cecile was motherly, right? She did certain motherly things. Was she perfect? No. Did she still leave her kid? Yes. But at some point, there was like an inkling of a good mother there. She cared for Fern. She nursed her, right? Nursing is something, feeding your baby is an act of love. And she did that before she left. So this is also something we want to note. This is some background we're given about Cecile. At one point, Cecile was motherly, caring for and nursing Fern, right? Because she could have left. She didn't have to pick her up and nurse her. This might indicate that it wasn't the easiest decision for Cecile. Maybe it's something she wanted to do, and she had her reasons for doing it, but she didn't just leave without some type of expression of emotion towards the girls. And so this is really important for us to annotate. So what you're going to do is you're going to finish reading. You're going to read the last page and a half on your own, annotating the text. As you're reading it, I want you to think about, how does this fit into our overall story? And I also want you to make note of how many times Fern says, my name is Fern, or I'm not little girl. I want you to make note of that, and I want you to annotate it at the bottom, because this is going to become very important. She continues to call her out of her name. And while you're reading it, I want you to think about, how do you feel when people call you out of your name, right? Why is your name important to you? So I want you to think of that as you read, and as you come across all these several times throughout the rest of this chapter. Fern says, that's not, my name is Fern, or I'm not little girl. So I want you to think about that. So go ahead, finish reading. You want to use these annotations on your exit ticket. So I'm going to make our annotations pretty large here so that you can pause this video and you can write them down. You will need them for your exit ticket. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will be posting a misconception video going over our exit ticket around 5 or 6 o'clock.